Welcome back, everyone. My next guest has never been on my radio show before. I have with me Gary Hees, and he is the Executive Clinical Director of Decision Point, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Welcome to the show. I do want to say we are live on Facebook, so listen up, everyone. This is really important, the conversation that we're going to be having right now, and I just want everyone to hear. Like us, follow us, and all that kind of stuff. You can also call into anything that you're listening to here at 602-277-5369. So let's talk a little bit about your welcome to the show and what it is that you do.
I am the Executive Clinical Director. I determine what the programming is going to be, how we're going to clinically approach what goes on with people with drug and alcohol issues. And as we'll probably find out as the show goes on, there's a lot more involved with it than simply putting a plug in the jug and not drinking.
I bet. So it's got to be really hard.
Well, it is, especially when physical dependence develops, and that's what you see happening a lot with the opioid epidemic now.
Oh my God, it's huge. Now here's the thing, right now we are looking it's just after the holidays, and so there's a lot of people out there that even if they maybe weren't, they are now, right? I mean, it happens, they go off the wagon or whatever it is, but especially it's a hard time of year. So this is a great time that you're here. There's also a lot of people that really would like to now, this is a new year, it's a new them, and they want a change, right? So Let's talk a little bit about, first of all, I want to get some information out where you're located, which is in Prescott.
That is correct, with a detoxification facility in Prescott Valley.
Okay, and your website is decisionpointcenter.com. You got to go up there and look at it. Maybe, and I'm just going to say this, maybe it's you that is dealing with something. Maybe you have a son or a daughter, or you know somebody out there. We all know someone who has some sort of a drug dependency or an alcohol dependency or whatever they're dealing with. We do all usually know somebody. You can also call them. Their number is toll-free 877-77-ADMIT. Okay, that makes it really easy.
Right.
Okay, I want to know what the stigma is surrounding the drug and alcohol problem.
Well, unfortunately, over the years, what developed was the viewpoint that if someone becomes addicted or becomes dependent on any kind of substance, that it must be some sort of characterological or moral failing. And the truth is, it's absolutely the opposite. When a person begins to use those substances, over time, dependence develops, and as that dependence develops, that becomes a priority within their life. And if you really sit down and interview someone carefully, what you find out is that they're not a bad person or a person who doesn't demonstrate character, but they began to lose those positive traits the more dependent they became on the substance. So what actually happens in the development of addiction is the opposite of what most people think.
Really? That's amazing. Now, you are the director, the executive clinical director of Decision Point. When they call, I want to know what the steps are. Obviously, you need to call. That's the first step, is you need to make that call.
Absolutely.
What happens then, and let me give out that number because there's a lot of people that might want to write it down and call, maybe now, maybe right as soon as they can. The number is 877. It's toll-free, 877-77-ADMIT. Okay? And go ahead and tell them what the process is and how do you know when you're doing that interview? Because do you do the interview? Who does them?
We have admissions individuals who usually deal with the people themselves. Okay. But one of the things that makes Decision Point very, very different is that we do not look on a limited basis like a lot of the treatment industry does at simply what are you using and how much are you using and when did you start using. Most of the time, in fact, in the majority of cases, what's going to be in the background of an individual who's developed addiction is going to be trauma or mental illness, learning disabilities, even people on the Asperger's spectrum those people are particularly vulnerable to developing an addictive disorder. And the problem in the industry in the past has been that they simply looked at the substances, which is looking at the surface, but not down below at what really generates and powers the addiction. Careful assessment is called for, and that's what we do at Decision Point. We find out what started the addictive process, and we address it as well as the dependence on the substances themselves.
So is that how we combat this issue, is by really finding out what their real problem is?
Well, here's the problem. A lot of people look at the treatment industry, and if you look at figures, they look up and they go, a lot of people relapse after being in treatment. If you don't get to the underlying issues by careful assessment, by comprehensively examining all of those issues, you're putting a Band-Aid on a gash. Someone is going to look really good when they leave the treatment center, but the same set of issues that develop the addiction are still going to be present, and that's when those people come back.
Okay, and also there's something else that I wanted to say too. There are other places out there, but you're located in Prescott.
Right.
So when I say that they're located in Prescott, they might not want to listen, but there's a reason why they should. It's what makes you different. And I think that's what I want to get out right now.
Exactly. And it's dealing with it in a comprehensive way, figuring out what all the components around what needs to be done in order to treat the addiction. It's also dealing with people in a compassionate and respectful way. For a long time in the industry, the model was, you're nothing but an addict, pull the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth, just be quiet and listen. That is essentially disrespectful to people who are at the lowest point in their life. And believe me, when you deal with people who have gotten caught up in dependence and addiction every day, what you'll find out is that no one has to put them down. No one has to run them down, because no one does that as harshly to themselves as the addict.
Now, so true. So the website is decisionpointcenter.com. The toll-free number is 877-77-ADMIT. And so important. Here's another important question. So there's a lot of people out there that may not feel comfortable necessarily about talking, to that person, a friend, a loved one. What's the urgency of them doing it? How do we make us comfortable in doing that in the first place, really,
Well, Carol, let me be absolutely frank, because it's a matter of life and death. Out on the streets, part of what's going on in the opioid epidemic and people overdosing so much is that those drugs are being mixed with other drugs. Drugs like fentanyl, drugs like carfentanil are absolutely deadly when combined with an opiate. The problem is this: to not speak out, to not have that courage of your convictions and enough love to tell that person the truth rather than have them like you in the moment, could well end up in a person dying from an overdose. It is literally a matter of life and death. That's why we're seeing happening on the streets what we're seeing now.
We are. And so how would you suggest someone sitting down with somebody and doing that?
Oh, you've got to begin with looking at them. And I'd really almost recommend sort of a pattern to it. Make sure first they understand that you love them. Secondly, make sure that that individual understands that you love them so much you are going to tell them the truth, rather than smooth things over or ignore things so that there's peace in the relationship, and then tell them the truth.
Sometimes it takes love to do that. That's really the love.
It is. It is, but it's a different kind of love. It's like parenting with an addict. it's actually almost the reverse of what you would normally think a parent would do that will be effective with an addict. And we could talk more about that if you want.
We're going to go to a break, and when we come back, we want to talk further. Whether this is you or someone that you know, this is important. The number to call them is 877-77-ADMIT. It is DecisionPointCenter.com.
For trading it all.
And we are talking with Gary Hees, and he is the Executive Clinical Director of Decision Point. So important, this conversation, and I'm so glad that you're here for people to be able to listen, because, it's not an easy topic, conversation to have, and certainly not an easy conversation to have with somebody, that be a loved one or a friend, but you got to do it. It could be life or death for somebody.
Well, it absolutely can be, and people need to understand this isn't about drumming up business. Unfortunately, in the United States, there's no shortage of people who need treatment. What this is about is the deadly combination of drugs that are on the street right now, and the fact that no one, literally no one, knows when they take a dose of those drugs what they're getting, and if that will be the last dose they ever use.
That's the problem about it's not like the 70s, when things were quite different. It's very different now, and it's very scary. And I know there's a lot of parents out there that are listening, grandparents, and people that have dealt with somebody in this issue. You do alcohol and drug as well. I don't know what else you do, but I mean, the drug problem is just so rampant, and it's so sad to see, especially some of these young kids that are just getting involved and killing themselves.
Well, I can tell you right now, Carol, there are listeners out there with us right now who know of or have a family member or have a niece or a nephew who is living in their parents' basement using drugs and seems to have sort of a pointless, directionless life and existence. We call that failure to launch. It's actually a clinical condition where they do not develop a firm identity, a sense of themselves, and out of their sense of identity, develop a purpose in life, and then learn how to express that out in the world in the form of a career. That's something else that we do, as well as being extremely good at treating trauma and at dealing with people with learning disabilities or on the Asperger's spectrum by understanding their condition and tailoring their treatment to them and how they learn.
And this is what makes you different. And it's so important that you realize that you're not just going through the phone book and going, oh, this one's near me. So, yeah, I'll go to this one. It's not about that. It shouldn't be at all, as a matter of fact.
Well, that's really not the way to pick it. And again, I hope people don't think I'm being over dramatic. I'm not. But you would not, if you were picking a hospital because of a fatal disease, potentially fatal disease that your loved one had, you wouldn't pick it by putting your finger down in a phone book.
Right.
You wouldn't do that. And that today is the way we have to look at drug and alcohol treatment problems.
Now, the phone number is toll-free 877-77-ADMIT, and the website is DecisionPointCenter.com. So what are the signs then, let's say, that someone is having an alcohol or a drug problem?
Oh, gosh. There are physical signs: red, watery eyes, shakes. There are emotional signs: irritability, a change in the group of friends that the person is hanging out with, a change in their habits. One of the dead giveaways that you may have depression involved with an addictive condition is when you see this person who had a passion for a sport or an activity, and suddenly they stop doing that, and instead they isolate off and are not really engaging with other people. All of those are signs that you need to sit down and sincerely ask the question, and don't allow the person to push you away. That's usually the reaction that they have. It's sort of, leave me alone and let me be in my corner and let life happen to me. Don't do that with someone you love.
The number to call is 877-77-ADMIT, DecisionPointCenter.com. there's a lot of times that we might even have somebody that we love and has gotten into an issue where they've maybe even cleaned and they keep on going back, and it's over and over and over again of either relapsing or what have you. Is it too late? Did you give up on that person or what?
Really, it's not too late, Carol. My clinical opinion is that when we have people who have multiple treatment episodes, very often it's about the treatment they received as much as it is about the persistence of their addictive condition. Again, without doing thorough, comprehensive assessment to know what's driving the addictive process and how it developed, you're going to have someone who looks good, who has that Band-Aid on the gash, but goes out to try and function again in real life and just cannot pull it off without the substances.
Well, I really like this question that you have here because I think it's important too. When is an addiction more than just an addiction? Because some people, I think they're doing something and maybe they don't even realize that it's already an addiction. I don't know. When is it?
Yeah. Addiction technically depends on chemical and emotional dependence on the substance. Let's be real frank. There are thousands of people in Phoenix, Scottsdale area right now who are dependent upon prescription opiate painkillers and may not even realize it. We had, and I spoke to this woman on the phone, we had a woman call us, and she was so aware because of some of the campaigns of getting information out that she literally said, here's what I've noticed. My doctor gave me Xanax for anxiety, and I've upped the dose 4 times now, and it's starting to scare me. And believe me, when you deal with anti-anxiety meds, what they call benzodiazepines, those are extremely subtle. They're very difficult to detox off of, and they can be extremely dangerous if used over a long period of time.
I'll tell you something, it's so dangerous because also I feel that doctors tend to write these scripts out so easily. I don't know if it's changing, sometimes I think I see on the wall that now they're getting a little bit tighter, but it seems like, with Xanax and stuff like that they just write it out so easily and it's so easy to get addicted. And a lot of people don't even, like you said, I don't think they even realize that they are addicted.
I've got you. I would say that people don't realize it. When we look at what's going on, it's not only doctors may prescribe too freely. That might be part of the problem. The other part of the problem is when someone becomes dependent and then they become desperate in order to get the substance. That's when we see what I talked about in the first half of the program. That's where we see their character and their moral and ethical behavior drop, and they begin to doctor shop, going to multiple physicians. A lot of the physicians now have measures in place and have data banks where they can check and make sure that they don't get caught up in that kind of thing with a patient. They actually want to help.
That's really nice to know.
Yeah.
So how important, though, is an assessment then to successfully really treat? Mm-hmm. And that's what makes you all different. So how important it is?
It's night and day. It's night and day. Literally, we evaluate the individual with a psychiatrist. We send them to a clinical psychologist who does a clinical interview and a battery of psychological measurements. We evaluate nutrition. We evaluate family structure and what the conflicts might be there. We evaluate them medically as well. You'd be amazed what the data is nowadays about the presence of depression and how well connected it can be to a lack of good nutrition that actually makes it worse, and it becomes one of those factors that keeps the addiction going. So if you don't look at all of those things, you're really leaving a stone unturned, and you're leaving a landmine behind this person as they go out and they try and live a life of recovery.
So the number to call them, it's toll free. It's 877-77-ADMIT. The website is decisionpointcenter.com. So is any of this ever covered at all? I mean, because, I think a lot of people are worried, even though it shouldn't be an issue when it comes to something like this, they would like to know whether or not any of it could be.
Oh, you mean covered by insurance?
Insurance at all?
Oh, yes. Lots of insurances cover it. The issue that a lot of people have faced has been that they have a high premium that they pay, and there's a high out-of-pocket or deductible expense. People should know that when they seek treatment, that it is actually against the law for a treatment center to not collect that deductible or that out-of-pocket expense. They must make a good faith effort to do that. So people need to keep that in mind. But is it covered? Yes.
That's awesome that it is. So you know what? The only way you're going to find out, pick up the phone. The phone number is 877-77-ADMIT. The website is decisionpointcenter.com.